Hello. Welcome to Agora.Community's conversation with. We have today a guest who is not completely unfamiliar to some of you. If you were around during the 24-hour Ultimate stream, it was a little later at night. It was pretty chill. Jacob, our very own Jacob, sat down with an old friend of his named Tomáš, Jech, and they go way back. What's interesting is that what he's been doing for the last little while is kind of producing and independently producing a game that he's developing with his partner. And so he came on, they kind of got caught up, and then they just took a look at the game together and just sort of, just played it and reacted to it. And the people in chat at the time were pretty excited because it's really an interesting game that's clearly, in my mind at least, clearly something that's made by someone who really understands characters, because there's a lot of really interesting characterization in this game, really fresh take on a classic genre. And anyways, I mean, it was a really great conversation, and we decided to bring him back and kind of pick his brain because something kind of crazy happened. GDC happened, and it was live for the first time in many years because of the pandemic. And I thought we all thought it would be pretty interesting to kind of pick his brain to see what that was like as a sort of one of the next big milestones in his journey on getting this thing done and released. So I'll bring on Jacob, and then we'll bring in Tomáš, and we'll get this party started. Jacob.
Hello.
Greetings.
How you doing?
Not bad. How are you? We haven't done one of these in a while, you and me. Are you? Yeah, well, Tomáš and you go way back. Remind me again exactly that was in school, right?
Yes, in college. So that would be 15 years ago. Wow. And longer. A while. So yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
And we've known each other and worked together.
And ironically, the two of you actually did a challenge somewhat similar to the Ultimate Animation Challenge together, probably about 15 years ago. So it seemed fitting that there was little reunion happening on stream during an Ultimate Challenge where you got to kind of reminisce about the good old days and take a look at his game.
Absolutely. The two of us and one of our other good friends did a 3-person animation challenge in 2007.
3 persons. That's but it was more. How long was it? I'm trying to remember. I remember the details.
32 hours straight.
32. Okay. Wow.
Yes.
So 24 hours wasn't hardcore enough. That'd go for a full 32. That's when you know you're made of something like metal. Another quick tribute to our guest today is that he's probably one of the, at least the only animator I know who's ever done a TED Talk.
That's right. He would be quick to correct you that it's a TEDx talk, but they're the same to me. Yeah.
That would be his modesty talking, but yes, okay. Yes. Granted, that is true. Okay, let's bring him on so he can.
That when we bring him in, yeah.
Yeah, okay. TED, what is the difference between TEDx and TED? Is it just TEDx is like an affiliate or something like that, or maybe
you'll have to ask him.
Okay, let's do it. Tomáš, welcome to the show.
Talk. Oh, okay, sorry.
He was yelling at the screen. And now he's here yelling at us. So what's the difference between TED and TEDx exactly?
So TED is like the huge official, like I think once a year conference.
Right.
TEDx is I don't know that much about the difference, but I just know that TEDx happens like in many places independently at many locations over like lots of times during the year, and a lot of those do end up on like the TED site and all that.
Got it.
But
okay.
And it is an achievement, but it's like I guess a whole different thing to literally be at the TED convention. So that's why I correct people.
Can you share a bit about what your TEDx talk was about?
Sure. It's it's coming up on a decade old now. So if doing a spit take when you said 15 years wasn't enough,
buckle up. I'm going on a road trip down memory lane.
So I did a talk called Being Insecure, which was basically about it's a little 15-minute talk about my journey through some larger AAA studios at the time, and basically how that felt like from a insecurity standpoint, imposter syndrome standpoint. And and what that was like kind of as an emotional journey. I feel like I like to talk about that kind of stuff a lot because I'm like very I'm just sort of I feel always scared of everything. And so I feel like a lot of when I was in school and I think Jacob, you'll probably remember this, but like there was this vibe of like kind of always feeling like like, oh, I love animation. Animation is the greatest thing ever. I can't wait till I'm animating all the time. Don't you love animation? I love animation. And it's like, and there, it was really, really like very infrequently did people and even professionals from my standpoint, and it's not like I had a huge viewpoint, but I was like, it just seemed like nobody was saying, but also I kind of hate animating a lot of times, you know, like
That's so funny.
like it's incredibly
Yeah,
grueling and
that's
I
right.
feel like I'm constant, like actually my 99% of my experience is making things that I'm not like not proud of, and like
Yeah.
how do I get better at it?
Mhm.
But then you turn around and go like, this is the best. I love learning to animate, you know? And so
Yeah.
it felt like there was this kind of positivity veil over, because you were too scared to say like, admitting that you like were miserable
Yeah.
sometimes animating seemed to be like an admission that you weren't cut out for
Right.
animation. And
It was
so
taboo somehow.
yeah, and so like that I really struggled with that. And obviously like going straight from Bowling Green, Ohio to like Pixar and then Bungie and stuff like that, it was only intensifying that kind of like I need to hide the fact that I feel like I'm really, really struggling, and that only hurt my career. That only hurt my ability to grow. So um, eventually, I started doing these talks, and it was like, you know, as many of these things are, it felt good to say it to people and have people react positively, because that
Mm.
kind of validated me. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh, if there's an audience of people going, yeah, then I'm like, oh, okay, so like there is something resonant here. I'm not actually not cut out for this. It's just like we're all going through a similar problem.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's kind of almost cathartic for you to actually go on
Yes.
stage and talk about something that's not ever talked about, because you're not supposed to talk about Bruno, I guess, basically, right? Like it's funny because it's true though, right? Because a lot of people, especially back in school, I remember the same thing. Everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid, and it was just like they spent all their time sort of. It was almost like social media, you know, Instagram and
Mm,
Facebook posts. It shows only the positive side of everyone's life, and very
mhm.
rarely do people become vulnerable and be like, "By the way, I'm really going through something," and it kind of sucks sometimes. It's like
Yeah.
it's not often the case. It's usually, which actually kind of reinforces that doubt that you have, because you're
Right.
kind of thinking, what the friggin' hell? Like, am I really not cut out for this? Because I don't look like that person. I'm not excited every day about animation. And
Right.
so it really reinforces what you're already thinking, which is doubt.
Yeah.
What a great talk. That needs to be recycled on a regular basis, because I feel like it comes up all the time in these streams. The idea of imposter syndrome and just being genuinely just doubtful of your own abilities is
Mhm.
it is something we all share, all of us as a community. I don't think I've met an animator once now so far in these conversations who have said, "Oh no, I feel 100,000,000% confident in myself." It's
Yeah.
just not the case.
Yeah. Very rarely have I met somebody that's just straight up like, "Oh, everything's cool," you know? And I'm like, "Then you must have truly deep problems." No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
that's right. That's right.
No, but with the imposter syndrome thing too, like I think my early experience in my career at Pixar was, and I might have mentioned this on the last talk, I don't remember, but um, I had this kind of like the critical thing that messed up my whole view on imposter syndrome is anytime there's a conversation about imposter syndrome, it's kind of like there's this assumption that it's not valid. It's like, oh, if you feel like you don't belong, that's absurd. Of course you belong, right? Um, but my problem has always been like, yeah, but there's imposter syndrome and then there's self-awareness. Like I can't tell which is which, right? Like sometimes my worry that I'm not doing a good job might be right.
Yeah.
And like in the case of the Pixar internship, like being the only intern at the end of that wasn't like offered some sort of position or continuation at Pixar was like an enormous validation. Like, oh yeah, your imposter syndrome was spot on, man. Like, and obviously it was like a super amazing experience. I don't know that my managers would totally agree with me. Like they were obviously like there were very specific reasons why they didn't pick me, which we can go into if you want to. But it did feel emotionally at the time like, oh, all that worry I had was like culminated into this
Mm.
validation of that worry, and it's hard to shrug it off for me ever since. Um, the way that I've kind of coped with it has been like, well, I have to like find coping mechanisms and emotional ways to deal with it that are okay with the fact that maybe it's true. And for me that has been like, well, regardless of whether I am good enough for this role or I am the best choice or not, I am what I've got, and I am what they've got if they've hired me. And so I just like, it's true or it's not. I just need to do my best work. It doesn't change my decision going forward, and that's kind of helped me not worry about it as much, not let it consume my brain. It's just like, well, either way, I'm either not good enough or I am, and both result in me needing to put my best work forward and just work hard, right? And so
Yeah, the
it's like,
results don't change regardless of the reality.
yeah,
Basically,
yeah,
you're going to do your best no matter what. So,
and actually worrying more,
yeah,
results in me doing worse work
totally.
potentially. And
Yep.
so also in both cases, ask for help,
Mhm.
get people, talk to people, get feedback, because if you're amazing, then that's just going to make you more amazing. And if you're not quite there, then that's going to help you get there. That would be your course of action anyway. And
Yeah.
so, um, yeah, I mean, at least that's for me, that has been like a helpful way to think about it, as just sort of like, well, either way, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do the next step the same thing.
That's good advice for life in general, I feel like, because it's like, it's just true how how it's like sort of a self-proclaimed prophecy kind of spiral that you can put yourself into when you start doubting yourself. And then you're like, well, I'm never going to win. So why should I even go and compete? Why should I play
Mm.
basketball? Because I'm not tall enough anyways. Like all these things just end up happening in your head. I was projecting there, by the way. And then it's just, for sure, 100% is going to increase the odds of you failing because
Mhm.
you're just taking wind out of your own sail, basically. Jacob, I think you were going to say something.
Oh, I was going to say, since you brought it up, Tom, what sorts of feedback did you receive from your internship at Pixar?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, so what's funny is it's exactly what Brent was saying, was basically all of the habits that I built from being scared that I wasn't good enough seemed to manifest into the exact behaviors that were that made me seem not production ready. So like, I was working really late into the night and I wouldn't sleep or go home because I was like freaking out about something. I frequently made changes to shots without consulting anyone because I was like, "Oh, this isn't good. Like, crap, this isn't going well. They're gonna hate this." I scrap it and I start over, and it's like these manic sort of like changes that in the morning weren't validated. Like my mentor would be like, "Why is there a change to the shot? We didn't talk about any changes. It was fine." You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, well, I just thought of this other thing that I thought would be better. And he's like, yeah, but now you're like, I don't know how you're going to finish this on time,
Mm-hmm.
and like, now you're running the risk of not actually even completing this assignment. And in my mind, I'm like, it's okay. I'm going to stay here all night, And then like, I stayed there. I did actually stay once all night working until the next day. And I was sent home that morning because someone found out, like, and they were like,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
that's not even really allowed. Like,
Yeah.
so you have to go home now. And I was like, I felt so stupid. Like, it was just a lot of those kind of behaviors, which were directly from the fact that I was too scared to ask for help. I was too scared. Like, I was afraid that things weren't good enough. I was making judgments on my own of like, oh, these other shots are better than mine, so I need to do more. And all that did was like scramble all my work and make me have these crazy hours, which, on no sleep, you make even worse decisions, right? And like, those doubts run even deeper. And so that was like the kind of feedback I ultimately got, was like culminated into sort of like production readiness was like the main reason that they didn't feel I was ready to be on a production.
I'm curious, what in your mind, because that would have been very, very interesting to get that feedback, because I think, considering your state of mind, you had two paths. You could have gone the darker path and said it just would just allow that feedback to crush you and to essentially confirm all these things that you've been telling yourself all this time. Or you could have chose, which I believe is obviously the path that you chose. But maybe it wasn't that simple. That's why I'm curious how you can answer this. Or you could have chosen well, I'm going to use this as constructive criticism, and I'm going to figure out a way of working on myself so that I don't continue to find myself in this sort of endless loop. So like, how did you ingest that information coming from them? And like, was it immediately obvious what you needed to do to improve? Or was it like a bit of a journey to get there?
I mean, it was definitely a journey. Like, I think rarely do I've experienced this with folks I'm mentoring, as well as with folks that like, as well as in myself, but rarely do you need to hear something only once. And I feel like what happened with me was that was definitely a huge pivotal lesson, but it wasn't until like years later that culminated into like what I'm hoping is the attitude I have now. But so I guess like it wasn't like a branching path. It was more like column A and column B. And I was like, there was definitely times where it crushed me. There were days where it crushed me. And then there were days where I was like, well, I can pick myself up, and it's good that they told me, like I can learn from those things, right? It would have been worse to just not know at all.
Oh man. It did you a huge favor, probably, like by being so earnest and so forthcoming with that feedback.
Yeah, it was an incredible gift to have that. And I think the thing I'm most proud of from there, and I think I've mentioned this before, but was that I received that feedback very graciously. Like I had a lot of gratitude. And again, I don't know if whether that was a form of me still posturing or if it was truly like gratitude at the time, but either way, I'm glad that was my behavior.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In hindsight, the new and improved you definitely appreciated that feedback.
Sure. And like, and it's hard to see, especially, when you're in your early 20s or something, it's hard to see things for like, oh, this will benefit me 10 years from now. It's like an impossibly long way away that you don't even consider anymore. But
you'd be retired by then. What are you even worried about that?
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
When you're 20.
And so like, and so it's hard to see that with that clarity sort of into the future. But I think like ultimately I went sort of with a lot more humility and I would say like kind of like, okay, I need to like reach out to people, and I can't do these like kind of crazier behaviors that I did in school, right? And it's like another thing at Pixar, just as a logistic thing, like at school I worked all the time and had all these bad habits of like, oh, I just slept on the computer chair and then worked and then watched a movie and then worked, and like it felt like I was constantly working, but probably like when I got to Pixar I was like, oh wow, I don't think I've actually worked for 8 hours for an 8-hour day straight. Just like I take so many breaks and do random crap. So like that was hard for just to have focus in that way, and not be like sort of just like, oh no, I can take a nap and work again in 4 hours or and so like after Pixar, when I went to Bungie, that actually like that gave me a different lesson, which was like Bungie had incredibly strict contractor rules about hours, and so I had to like clock in and put in hours and then clock out, and there was no staying over. Like that literally just you couldn't, because they would like they were tracking that so strictly. And so I really had to like learn in those few years there to like manage my time, and actually just to drive home the point of not quite taking my lessons right away, it's like I was I forget exactly what it's called. Do they still call it like a PIP or something? Whatever the thing is that when you're like, oh, we're close to firing you. So
yeah, PIP like stand for Personal Improvement Plan.
Yes. I don't know if that's what they called it, but that was something like that. Where basically a few months in, I was put on that because I wasn't
the watch list.
Yeah. And again, they were very clear with me, and it was really good that they did that. But it was basically like I was taking really long for each asset. And again, I was coming from that, Pixar was very like, oh, you have like a week to do a shot or something. Like, and at Bungie, that was like you were trying to output game animations much faster for a production that was launching, in a year or whatever. And so like I just wasn't used to that. I was getting feedback a lot, but that also, every time you ask for feedback, you get it. And I wasn't prioritizing it or figuring out who was like the actual person that dictated. I didn't think of like, oh, there's only actually my lead that needs to approve this. I don't need to go get feedback from the whole team and implement all of it. But I was doing that because I didn't have the sense of priority and getting it done and all that stuff. And so that was a big lesson at Bungie, where once I got put on that PIP, I was like, oh, everything is reprioritized in my brain. I need to get things done on my to-do list. So like now I was like getting feedback and then asking which feedback I should actually do for my lead. And then I was getting things done way, way, way faster. And so that was another big sort of lesson toward hopefully what is a continuously evolving version of myself. But yeah, those two kind of 1-2 punch of like not production ready and then too slow and getting too much feedback and trying to implement all of it without priority was like those big early lessons that I had to learn.
How does the PIP end? Like after those changes and improvements you made to how you handle things, what's the result of that?
They basically gave me a date, which I think was like a month out from when they told me that was like, you need to be on schedule by then. So like you're like 2 weeks behind. And if you get back on schedule where you're completing everything in the correct estimates by a month from now, then it's fine. And if not, then we'll have another conversation. But that could be a we're letting you go kind of thing. Which again was super amazing that they were that clear with me. There's I've seen a lot of managers and things where that clarity isn't there, and people feel surprised when they're let go.
Yeah. I'm trying to put myself into the young Tomáš Jech's shoes back then, after coming hot off the press from Pixar, and the feedback was like, let's not like your work habits are not good. You can't just continue to work all night. And now you're forced with this feedback that you're too slow. I can see how you would have had to fight really hard not to fall back into those other sort of reflexes of staying up all night and killing yourself to get caught up. Because if someone gives you that kind of ultimatum, naturally you're just going to go all in, I would imagine. Right. So I'm curious how you managed to how did that turn out? Given that month, did you get caught up, and what did you end up doing to get there?
I mean, I guess like thinking back on it, I was just incredibly lucky that just wasn't allowed. Like I just couldn't. And so I had to spend those 8 hours like doing the work.
Wait,
like
a full 8 hours? Back to back?
Yeah, I know. You're joking, but it is like it was.
I'm not joking. I'm just like you. I'm just like you.
But yeah, like I was. It was just like the contractor laws in Washington at the time. This was in 2010, 2009. I mean, like, I don't know what, they're probably still like that, but like it was just incredibly strict. Like I couldn't take any assets home or anything like that. That was like absolutely not allowed. And then at work, it was all like hourly. Like I had to clock in and clock out. And like, if I was at work clocked out, that would be like, well, you're probably let go. And if you're, and like, it was so strict that like your manager might be let go too in that case. And so like, they were incredibly like strict about it, which I actually ended up missing later when I was like in staff positions. If you're familiar, like I think like generally like full-time positions don't have this hourly like strictness to
unfortunately
them. And so like you can fall into those bad habits. The freedom's nice, but like like I definitely am grateful that I had to spend like those 2 years like being very structured with my time and being very prioritized with feedback because I had to. There was just no wiggle room.
It was evolve or die, basically.
And then there
was someone there that was like that took assets home to work on them because they were stressed, and they were just like they just never came back.
No one ever heard from them again ever.
It was this is of course not allowed.
A forethought to us now in the this is a before times kind of story before the pandemic where everyone's got stuff at home now. It would feel that back then would be very, very weird. It just disappeared. Jacob,
well,
you're saying
it's like a leak issue and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
I was wondering how you pulled all this feedback together from both Pixar and Bungie then as you moved to Blizzard, and how that experience was like.
Yeah, I mean, Blizzard was very different from either of them in that, Blizzard, I was full time, so there wasn't the same structure. So I definitely like reverted a little into like working really late nights and kind of burning myself out. But like you have to have some lessons many times. I continue to have these lessons.
Oh boy. Well, you are who you are, right? There's going to be instincts for sure. Like if people the tiger can't change the stripes, not completely anyways.
Right.
So I guess it's a constant struggle. And I think, it sounds like what you've done is built more tools around yourself. So you don't always have to go into that sort of mode by the sounds of it. But every once in a while, you probably slip into it, just like probably a lot of the rest of us.
Yeah. but yeah, like at Blizzard, it was very. I would say the big difference, the big lesson there was like I was so intimidated by the sort of the name of Blizzard, which I mean, similarly with Pixar and Bungie, obviously, but that really hit me hard at Blizzard. And basically, I never gave any feedback to anybody in a sort of like culture or working relationship sense. So like I just like I was too scared to say anything about anything. And, you know, as a result, I would just fume about things like, you know, in a corner on my own.
Oh, really?
And which I think is very common, is a very common thing for folks to do, like, because it is really scary, like, to, you know, give feedback to the people that are paying you money, right?
For
like,
sure.
And like, especially if you're like already riddled with imposter syndrome and you're scared
right.
like, I mean, I spent every day at Blizzard just like literally with the singular thought of like, how do I make sure I'm not fired? You know,
yeah.
like how do I impress folks and do everything I need to do to be like,
well,
you know.
It's the perfect storm if you think about it. A person who really struggles with self-doubt, the biggest piece of kryptonite that you could ever throw on their lap is give them a very, very, very like dream job position.
Sure.
Because now you're just like, I'm at the top of the pyramid. How did I get here? No, I just definitely, for sure, I should definitely not be here. If I shouldn't have been down there, I should not absolutely be up here. So that's, I can imagine the alarm bells going off in your mind there. So you just like, keep your head down.
Yeah.
Keep your head down. Don't give them a reason to fire you. Don't just keep your...
Which obviously is, again, self-fulfilling prophecy of you know, I just can't.
There's a theme here. There's a theme.
I'm a mess.
I'm glad we could all laugh about it.
Yeah. So yeah, I just, you know, you do things like you end up complaining at lunch with a friend instead of actually doing anything about anything, right? And again, like I don't want to like. I'm sure there's tons of people in situations doing that right now, and I'm not condemning that. I'm just saying like it does have a self-destructive bend to it as well, which it can really affect your work and affect your ability to deliver because
there's a difference, I think, between going out and having some drinks with buddies at work and just letting off some steam versus letting it literally take over your sort of your attitude, so that you're now you're always looking at for problems instead of thinking about solutions. And it can become like a bit of a parasite that grows really quickly. So I totally get what you're saying. Because exactly. Like sometimes you absolutely should go out and just bitch and complain about things as long as it doesn't become the norm. Yeah.
And then some stuff, it's like, it's worth, you know, again, like it's hard to say this because I know that there's probably folks in situations where this really, their management might not be okay with it. But when you are in a situation where you feel like you certainly should give feedback to management and in any channels where you're able to do that. But again, it's hard to give that feedback because I know their retaliation is a real thing that happens to folks. So I don't know like what's the best way, but it just sometimes it sucks. I think in my case, I definitely could have been giving the feedback without actually any fear of retaliation. I think like I could have been saying all that stuff, and it probably people would have been happy to make the changes or tell me why those things couldn't change or whatever it was.
Totally.
But I just like didn't even think that was a possibility because I was so scared, you know, like, and so, but otherwise, like I would say Blizzard is where I really developed. I mean, we're not talking about craft at all, but like I really developed a lot of craft skills there because it was just such an art focused studio and team. And so like, there was just a lot of really amazing support for just developing any kind of crazy idea you might have for making cool polished art. And so I was like doing just tons and tons of animation there. At Bungie, I would say, you know, I learned a lot more about delivering like solid animation on a schedule. And Bungie's incredibly technical, at least it was at the time, like engineering driven and design driven. And so like I learned a lot about stuff that eventually became like my favorite thing about game development, which is like animation systems, parametric blending, like integrating all these different animations into a single character so they blend between like all these different runs and jumps and looks and aims. Like, you know, I was just telling somebody, like, you know, in Halo games, it's actually very sandboxy, and so like almost every action can be done in almost every situation, and so you can be like on the back of a car looking 180 degrees behind you, reloading, and then throwing a grenade, and all those animations have to like work together, you know, at least somewhat. And so like solving those problems became one of my favorite things in development, especially when you made them look good, because those were the kind of moments that made animations almost have this life beyond what I created, because I would make these like 17 different assets, and then I would see them all come together in a way that you never get to see when you're working on them, right? It's like, oh, I made this one arm throw animation on a static T-pose, and then I made this like twisting body animation, and it's like all of them individually you can't put on a reel, they don't look like anything. But if you're seeing the system in your head, you can kind of like start to put these pieces together, and then they like kind of sing and really come to life in these moments that are driven by a player or by an AI. That's like really cool to see. And so I got to see a lot of under that hood at Bungie, and then at Blizzard I got to like play a lot under that hood, because you know they would give me like a dedicated engineer that would help me build stuff and teach me how those systems would work and build tools for me, and like it was very like artist centered there. So I like got to like try a lot of things. So yeah, so and a craft side, those were the kind of differences as well.
It's funny, the way you describe it is it really resonates with me, because it's often how I describe it to people that are trying to learn game animation. It's like it's hard to really fully understand the satisfaction that comes with that until you do it yourself, because it is a very intricate puzzle, and you need to enjoy the it's so micro, like the little pieces that you're building. Like if you're the type of person who really likes like layering clever thinking on top of one another to get and then be able to step back and see the gestalt of it when you're interacting with it, it gets hard. It almost sometimes feels like you're kind of like you're like this, you know, this genius roboticist that's sort of bringing this character to life, you know, one bolt at a time. Like it's what it kind of feels like. And I really do recommend people give it a shot, because it's actually a lot more accessible nowadays than it ever was, especially you just have to pick up, you know, obviously Unreal for free or Unity if that's more your thing. Because it's unbelievably accessible these days without you don't need any programming experience. And it's animation for sure, but it is absolutely very different from, you know, polishing some sort of acting shot for a film. It's just, they're both satisfying when you get people like laughing or crying because your shot was so great and so impactful in the theater. That's extremely satisfying, but this is also but a very different kind of satisfaction.
Yeah, I would say it's like there's definitely a lot, just in case someone isn't interested in this, like there's definitely a lot of animators and games that are just making amazing animations and assets, which is absolutely like still a role in games that you can have.
Cutscenes even, right? Like there's a lot of narrative stuff.
But I would say if you think you're interested at all in the sort of animation systems design kind of aspect of it, I think it's like one of the most undersold parts of being an animator. It's like so cool. Like if you have at all a mind toward the sort of slightly technical things, like I rarely feel more satisfied. Like I think for the kind of animator that I am, which again it's just different. Like it's more like I think I get more easily kind of fatigued from just making an animation asset that is going to live exactly as the way I made it. Right. Like, I think like the benefits of that is this just high level craft and acting that you can put into like an asset and see have the audience see exactly what you wanted them to see. I think for me, I like the surprise of making something, and maybe like you don't get to have as much control and can't be quite as nuanced and like perfect, but you get to be surprised by it, which is like so rare as an animator in any other capacity. Like, like animation is like, for the person creating it, one of the least surprising, least full of surprises that are good. It's like, I think every now and then you might have a happy accident that like results in like a cool acting choice or a neat way that something happened. But most of the time, probably you're meticulously crafting everything you do. And so, I think that aspect of it is like having your work kind of live on its own and then do things you weren't expecting or surprising you with things that can, if you get really into the system stuff, actually be good surprises and really cool results that you weren't anticipating. So that's cool. And I think even just game development in general, like that's also why, the game I'm working on, Begone Beast, is like highly like procedurally driven and has a lot of like AI driven systems, because even within games, I think I would be quickly fatigued working on a linear or like sort of like curated type of game with levels that are pre-made and stuff like that, because I don't know, like I've been making prototypes in this sort of realm of what Begone Beast is for like 3 years. There's no way that Clarissa and I, my wife who's working on it with me, would have been able to just be motivated doing that if it was a sort of static linear level based game, because we would have been playing the same
not to mention also just very, very like time consuming. Like it's not that it's already time consuming, but to make a game without that layer of proceduralism and building systems to be able to sort of get the most out of less, it would be like crippling, because it would be just so much data to produce, right? So it's also kind of a little bit of working smart, not necessarily just solely hard. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention this. I know I sound like a broken record, but this job that Tomáš is describing here, someone like an animator who enjoys systems and enjoys getting their hands a bit dirty with some of the technology. These people are quickly becoming extremely rare unicorns. They're like albino unicorns at this point. Like the industry is created this vacuum because this type of person is so sought after, because they're very good at getting content into the game and prototyped and sort of understood. And otherwise it requires a very complicated series of like, you got to pair a game designer up with a programmer and an animator, and they have to somehow work together to produce a thing. And these people are like, no, I can just give it to me. I'll totally just put it all in there right now. Just I get it. I'll put it in. And the speed and the efficiency that comes with that, and just the higher level of just it looking better, because the person who's going to like be thinking like a game designer, but also understands the systems well enough, but also is projecting what they want to see, like their vision of what that character should be doing in the game. They see all those things, so they can build a path there that balances all those things, rather than it kind of feeling a little discombobulated, which is often what unfortunately happens when you try to expect 3 different, very, very different perspectives to somehow just mingle and get the idea out. It usually ends up being a bit of an abomination on the first try. Yeah. So if you're interested in it, you should go down that path, because there's a lot of jobs knocking at your door. I can guarantee you that. Yeah.
And I would say, like, not to, this is like a thing in my own brain that I like to think, but it also, like, when you have this, when you diversify your skills a little bit in that capacity, especially down like a rabbit hole that you particularly like, or something like with me in systems, it's like, you can be a little worse at all of those things.
It's true. It's
and that's
totally
okay. True. You're still like very valuable. I think, like, I don't know if this is still a thing, but like when I was first visiting schools, like, in the last 5 to 10 years, like when I was like talking to a lot of folks, there's like a lot of, almost every place I went would be a question of generalist or specialist. I don't know if folks are asking that as much now, but the answer that I've always kind of come up with is like, it's like, both, because to become a generalist, you must first specialize in something. And so, like, I think, like, there's certainly a lot of different paths, and I'm not saying that's like the only way, but the true generalists that I've worked with that like truly are like they're some of the most extremely valuable people to have on a team, is usually come from a background of specializing in something, and then split into something else, and then split into something else. And in fact, I feel like specializing in something helps you learn other things too. So it's like, it's
gives
like
you perspective.
Right. It's like, because you already know like what it looks like to be deeply knowledgeable about one thing. And so you can kind of more easily branch and know the kind of questions to ask, and how to learn is like it's like I don't know how to, like, I'm sure there's smart people that have words for these things, but like learning how to learn is like a thing that I feel like
totally,
even very recently I've been like learning about myself, like what are the methods by which I learn things quickly, because I thought I was kind of like a solid, like, oh, I'm a good game developer who has a background in animation, and then once I went indie, it was like, oh my god, there's like 1,000 other things to learn that I thought I knew, and it was like now I'm like learning stuff every week of like from zero to good enough. It's like how can I get there as fast as possible? And so like I feel like I'm learning a lot more about how I can learn things, which has been extremely valuable, but also like I still don't feel like I have a total hang of it. But I would say it helps make me not afraid when you're staring in the face of something that is like, I don't know anything about this. And it's like terrifying to be like, oh, here's a thing you need to do. And you don't know what any of the words mean. You don't know how to do it at all. You don't know what, tools. And it's like, it helps you like be less scared of that if you've stared in the face of something like that many times and have gotten to good enough many times. And like, I think that's been a very fulfilling part of kind of going down the indie route. But I also think just in general, like, it's taught me that like, it's not impossible for you to learn almost anything. And I think it's not like unique to me in any way. It's like, I think it's easy to get comfortable and forget like you're actually capable of learning things pretty quickly. And it just seems impossible in the moment. But it's like, actually, if I gave you 3 full days, you could probably be knowledgeable about almost anything to a basic sense, like just enough to know like, oh, I know what tools these kinds of artists use. Because like you can just research a lot of that like to a basic degree. You're not going to become a master at it, obviously, but you can maybe demystify it enough to at least not be terrified to touch it and things like that. So I don't know, I'm kind of getting into the weeds here, but
that's all right. I'd actually like to go a little further on the education and learning stuff that you're talking about, because at your time at Riot, you started off as an animator and kind of turning around the animation department a little bit, but you ended in education and learning paths in Riot. And if I recall, you volunteered yourself for that role. Can you talk a bit about how that came up and what your goals were with that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think on one end of that, I was looking to basically, there were a lot of things internally like that were happening with Riot, the art departments specifically, that there was like this big like push toward T-shaped artists, which is like I don't know if that's like a phrase that is still being used.
You'll have to elaborate.
Yeah, it's so basically the T is like, this is like your general knowledge of things, and then you're deep in one, right? And so a T-shaped specialty is like you're a specialist in one thing, but you have this baseline of knowledge of everything else that you interact with. And so like,
I have not heard that before.
Yeah, so that was like a big thing at the time of like, how do we get all of our artists to know enough, like quickly know enough about all the other art disciplines so that they can more effectively work together in pods, because a lot of the work at Riot was matrixed. So it would be like, 4 different kinds of artists, a programmer, a game designer, QA, things like that. So like knowing a little bit more about each different discipline, like the idea was that you would become a much better developer, which I think I generally agree with. I think there's still areas where you can just do your own thing and that's fine. But it certainly gives you perspective in like, oh, what are the best ways I can hand my work over? How do I best communicate with this person? How do I better understand, also even just like empathize with like why doing this seems to piss this person off or something, or like make them, and so like just understanding things like people at the end of the pipe tend to get the collection of everybody's delays all at once, and they're always through. And it's like, and maybe for me it's like, what's the big deal? Like I got them the animation before we're shipping it, just like they can put the sound on it or whatever. It's like we don't even know what sound to put on it until your animations are done, and then you're still editing them, by the way. It's like you, if you understand a little bit better like the pain, it's a little bit easier to prioritize your work so that you're causing less pain for the folks down the line or up the stream from you or whatever. And so like that initiative meant like they were looking for someone to kind of build these classes to quickly, like in a 4 to 6 hour session, kind of like expose an art team to like a different discipline, like what are the absolute like core things you should know, and here are some core questions you should understand, and even try building something with their tools to kind of see like, oh, this is really hard, you know. Even if you weren't good at it, just like understanding like, oh man, like you spend a lot of time like looking through libraries of files, like I didn't know that, and like that makes sense why it's frustrating to change some, you know, like it's like you're understanding the specific angles of frustration rather than just general like, oh, they're pissed off when I'm late, you know. So you can be late in more specific ways that maybe ease that, right? And so that was really exciting to me because I was just generally interested in being more knowledgeable about that stuff myself. So I was like, oh, I have some experience like doing workshops, doing speaking events and things like that. I'd done some speaking at Riot, which had gone over well. And so, I decided to leave R&D, which was where I was currently in, and spend like about a year and a half or so building these internal classes, which ended up being extremely difficult, but resulted in we ended up taking all that info internally and pushing it out to externally. So they're on YouTube now and stuff. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But personally, like also, I thought, what a great way for me to learn all these different things. So,
yeah, selfish almost, right?
Yeah. And so like, you know, I had to go through so many, like all these meetings with all the different disciplines and figuring out what the most important things to them were and how they worked and what tools they used and how to communicate that to people who didn't know anything about it. And that was like a huge learning experience for me, which was pretty awesome that I had the chance to do that.
Well, this provides a very, very perfect segue because obviously in the shadow of this, in the wake of this, having seen the Matrix as you've unlocked all this knowledge and have a bigger idea as to just exactly what kind of ingredients go into making the sausage, you then found yourself going out on your own and building your own thing, which is, of course, Begone Beast. So I want to make sure we can kind of talk a little bit about, try to almost pick up where we left off or where you and Jacob left off, like where you were at, and then kind of talk a little bit about what happened at GDC and what kind of things came out of that, both positive and negative, and where are you at now?
Sure. Is there anything in particular you'd want me to start with?
I think I would start with, so where were you, what phase in the development were you when you were speaking to Jacob and you you gave a bit of a backstage look at the game? Where were you in the sort of the genesis or the evolution of the game at that point?
Right. So so basically to give a broader picture, in 2019 is when I left Riot, and at the time I wasn't like immediately thinking like I'm going to start a studio. I was more just like I was a little bit burned out from the decade of AAA, and my wife was going to start school, and so it just seemed like a good time to be like, I'm going to take a break for a while and then sort of assess things. My wife Clarissa had at the time sort of been a year or two into changing careers from marketing to engineering, and had decided to pursue a master's degree in computer science. And so like while she was starting that, I was like sort of just home, like resting and kind of like reconnecting with like what inspired me about art and games and all that stuff. We started prototyping stuff together in Unity. And so, obviously that turned into this immediate thought of like, oh my God, we could make a game. Like these are the two main ingredients, like art and code. And so we started making prototypes. We spent about 2.5 years making prototypes that did not really captivate us or anybody. There was like bits there that you can definitely see in the sort of Begone Beast prototype now. But it definitely became grueling in its own way. It's like, I'm going to go take a break from AAA and then kill myself making prototypes. But last September, we got some tough feedback and really good advice from a game designer friend of mine. And we kind of soft rebooted the whole thing and made a 6-month prototype, which we were about 4.5 months into when I talked to Jacob last.
The 24-hour challenge.
Yeah. And so we were with the goal of taking a fully functional prototype that like general people could play at GDC. That was like, okay, like we plan to go to GDC. Now we better build a prototype that now we're taking this very seriously, right? And so kind of that self-imposed deadline of like, all right, let's do this. And just as a backdrop to this, we had moved into Clarissa's parents' house in 2019, just to like, because neither of us had income at the time. So that's all happening in the background, as well as obviously the pandemic, which, everybody already has heard enough about. But so that's how we were spending our time. We came out of that 4 months with a initial prototype that we sent to folks that played. Actually, Jacob played it at the time. That was like, it was just good enough that people could play it and understand it. And that was really valuable. And then we made huge changes just based on those like 20 people who gave us feedback. And that resulted in the prototype we took to GDC. So, which impossibly ended up like fairly playable and bug free and worked pretty well there. And so
it was really cool.
Yeah. So just as like
just before you go on, Tomáš, just so in your mind, just to help other people that may want to of try to go down a similar path, what was the motivation and goal to go to GDC? Like, why would anyone want to go to GDC with what you had in hand at the time? What was the hope?
I think one thing was like, so there were a lot of components. One was like, I was just a fan of GDC from having attended as an attendee in the past. And second, like we had not seen people a long time. So it was like, oh, this would be cool just to like refresh ourselves and be motivated. And it would be fun to just like actually see people's faces and everything.
Totally.
It lined up time-wise, and it just seemed like, okay, this is a place full of developers, or at least industry-focused folk. GDC isn't typically accessible to non-industry folks because it's just prohibitively expensive to get tickets. So it's like there's not a huge reason to go there just as a gamer. And so that was a little less like scary to just be like, okay, we can make connections, talk to people and everything. And then the goal was also like, let's see if we get any attention from publishers, from folks that might fund this, from partners that might want to work with us, all that stuff. So like we didn't have a lot of expectations going with it. It was more just like, let's take a temperature because we've been kind of, nobody even knows we're doing this, So
Did you pre-book any meetings with anybody, or did you just sort of bring it and just try to like meet people on the fly while you were there?
I mean, I probably should have.
In hindsight.
Yeah. It was definitely felt like GDC had a lot of people in pre-booked meetings throughout the entire week. I was so like, it was a miracle to get a functioning prototype done on time to get there that I just like, it was literally like the day we drove up from LA to San Francisco was like, we just got the freaking like computers in the trunk with the prototype on it that we had just put the last bug fix on. And now I'm like, oh, thank God we have to drive for 7 hours, so I can't work on the game, so I can just relax. Like, this is it, we're done. And so
from my understanding, there's like two main parts of what you did there, right? You had a booth where people could play the game, and then the other thing was like a indie pitch.
Yes. So so I guess the only thing that we did kind of pre-book was there was an awesome event there called GDC Pitch, run by Jason De La Roca, and he's like a fixture in indie games and sort of like helping
he's huge,
build pitches and all that stuff. So he one of the best parts of GDC for us was, regardless of the actual competition, he 4 weeks beforehand, like when we submitted and we were selected as one of the contestants, and he basically offered that 4 weeks of his time to be like, any of the contestants that want to send me your pitch, I will give you feedback as many times as you want.
That's cool.
He wasn't actually judging the event; he was just like hosting it. But
he's been on enough of those panels that he would have a pretty good instinct to give you good feedback. Yeah,
right. And so I did that a bunch of times. I actually sent him videos of myself pitching, which was like, I just want you to know, if you ever are in this situation, that's like the worst thing to have to do, is like practicing speeches or pitching to an empty room is like agonizing. It just sucks. And like, especially if you're pitching to a person that's like there to give you feedback, they're not going to give you any reactions. They're just going to sit there like, you know? And it's like give you no energy back because one, that's probably the 5th time they're hearing it, and also it's like, you know, there's not energy in that room, right? And then like also bringing energy to a webcam or something where there's nobody there and you're just sending off that video to someone is like excruciating. But I really, really, you know, highly recommend to try to get through that because it's so important. Because that video or that practice, that's not where you're trying to impress someone. You're doing this agonizing thing so that you can be better on the actual day that it matters.
The dress
which,
rehearsal.
by the way, that day isn't even the main one either. Like, you know, that's still just a practice for like 5 years from now when you'll be doing another, you know. And so it's like, I think that's a huge lesson for me getting older is like, actually everything you're doing is in preparation for something else that you don't even know about yet. It's like, you keep thinking like, no, I won't take advantage of the learnings of this because this is the thing. Like, you know, it's like, this is the thing. It's like, no, actually, this is the thing that you need to learn from so that you can do this other thing, which will also just be a thing you need to learn from, you know. Everything is just scaffolding for the next thing. So really try to mine and take the time to kind of be as present as you can to mine it for information. So like, I feel like I took a lot of advantage of Jason's really amazing offer there, which was probably one of the best things to come out of GDC was just that being able to like send him stuff for feedback. And then, so there was that. And then I also needed to make a trailer for like this other contest that we submitted for, which was like a best in play category that was based on gameplay trailers. So I made like a panicked trailer, which is still the one on our website in like in a couple hours one night before it was due. And I was actually pretty happy with how that turned out. And so those were the only 2 things I think ahead of time that we had planned other than just going to GDC with a booth. And that certainly bit us in the ass a lot of ways because for one thing, I didn't even realize that in my sort of rush, I didn't even realize that the expo floor was only open for 3 days of that week. We showed up Monday morning ready to go. And I was like looking around at all this construction and I was like, man, they're going to be done with this in 2 hours. And someone else was like, it opens Wednesday. And I'm like,
you're like,
oh. That was probably easily available information.
Well, it sounds like someone was really too busy just baking that last build, I think, before they got out the door.
Exactly.
Yeah. Classic. So,
well,
okay.
But that was a better mistake than the other way around for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. That would have been disastrous. So, okay. So you got some great feedback from Jason De La Roca. You also got a chance to meet with some other entities while there. And where do you think that the barometer is on feedback? Do you feel like it's overwhelmingly positive? Is it a mixed bag? Is it like you got to go back to the drawing board? Where do you feel like you're sitting right now?
So, interestingly, we did this other event right before GDC. So the night before GDC started, there was an event called, oh my God, I'm blanking on it. I'm going to find it later and tell you, but it was, Courage XL. Sorry.
Nice. Thanks, Clarissa.
Thanks for the assist.
Thank you. Courage XL, which was like this. It was a very strange experience because it was like a bar setting where a bunch of indies showed their in progress or finished games for
while drinking. What could possibly go wrong?
Actually, not just while drinking, but when people played the game, you gave them a ticket to get a drink for free.
Oh, it's so
perfect. It was a fun thing, but it was definitely like a nerve-wracking, very scattered, noisy environment to be showing off a thing that you're terrified people are going to hate
the first time.
But we thought to ourselves like, well, better to have that first time not at GDC if we can.
That's right.
You know, at least we'll have
better to
one
it
day.
full of drunkards.
Yeah. And so that experience, I would say, felt to me more like a mixed bag because we found several bugs that we hadn't caught yet. The playtest felt a little long. I think it was running like 20 minutes or something, which was kind of long for like a show floor, you know.
Yeah.
a lot of the people there, obviously there were also like people drinking and people that weren't developers. They were more like on the biz dev side of things. So the kinds of questions and things they had reactions to were like not what we were expecting, you know. It wasn't like terrible or anything, but I definitely left that feeling like, whew, this is going to be a rough week of like, you know, hearing tough things and stuff like that. But
what
because we had those
piece of drunken feedback you got?
Well, my favorite piece, not maybe the most useful, but my favorite was somebody was playing the game and there's this like tutorial part in the demo where you're just running around as like the kids and you're screaming and stuff. And then I sort of just like without any preparation, this invisible door opens and a huge demon comes out. And that was like my way of being like, this is what you're going to face in the game. And so like, here's your preparation, go, you know? So you have a chance to kind of like see what the game's going to be like in moments. Right? And the sort of this tipsy person playing was like, okay, I see what you got here. Cute little character, a little bit cute, not very scary. Holy shit!
They were that verbose that they
That's actually the best thing about live playtesting in those environments is because everybody's very vocal. Not everybody, but I guess like lots of people are very vocal. I mean, and so you get to see like the feedback they would self-curate after the fact is not the same as seeing the actual moment-to-moment reaction and what they chose to do. A lot of difficult things when you get feedback in a forum or just after in a conversation from someone playing a game is they don't know what they didn't understand. And so they don't know to give feedback on that, right? And so you might be like, oh, did you use, like, here's a really basic example. It's like, how did you like all the abilities? And they were like, oh, they were all great. But unbeknownst to them, they didn't use half of them. Right?
That's right.
And so they might have this impression of the game that's very simple, easy to use, and they're not actually giving you feedback that it's too complicated because they didn't even see the things because they were so complicated, right? Or something like that, right? And so you might get like thumbs up, it's all great, but when you watch them, you realize, oh wow, this was so complex, you didn't even realize you weren't doing it, right? This mechanic was so nestled that you didn't even get to it, right? And so that's why it's like really great to see those things. There are ways to like, you know, deal with that in forums and things. Like a great thing that I learned, if you ever solicit feedback in a forum or something like that, is asking people to explain the mechanics briefly will allow you to
back
see,
to you almost.
Yeah, you'll see that, oh, they thought they understood this and they didn't, and this is how they thought they understood it, or they didn't even know about these three other things because when they described it to me, they didn't even include them, right? So that's a way, rather than saying like, were the mechanics satisfying or good, because then you're missing that potential pitfall there. Okay.
This would be a really good moment to just give quick shout out to all those people who do run the game test labs at these big companies, because honestly, there's a lot of science and a lot of you know, human engineering that goes into understanding how to expose a group of people to a product like this, and how to extract critically useful information, and to reduce and mitigate the noise that you can get from these kind of sessions. It never fails to amaze me, and it's so crazy. You can see right away, like some game companies have realized just how golden and how absolutely precious that is, and they invest a lot of time and energy. And then there's other companies that are just, we'll just get a bunch of people come in, play it, we'll just listen to what they say. But I feel like the ones on the other side really, they understand just how, because it's user experience, right? UX is so critical to the success of the game, because like you're saying, Tomáš, it's like nothing sucks more than putting all this effort into these mechanics, and like 75-80% of the people don't even know that they're there, is obviously not that's not a good time spent. It's like that money, you might as well just burned it. You should be putting it where or find ways of making sure it's exposed and understood to the players.
Yeah, and the way they give you feedback might be, this game is too simplistic, and you end up adding more mechanics.
That's
rather
right.
than not realizing
exactly.
Even seeing them, right?
Oh man, exactly. So that prepared you, that it was sort of a nice, easy way in to like pre-GDC. Then you got a mixed result. So how did GDC differ in as far as feedback?
So GDC, I think, well, the first thing was the mistake I made bought us 2 days. and we actually set up in the hotel and fixed some of those bigger glaring issues.
Oh, really?
Which
wow.
You know, other devs were like, not a good idea to be changing your build right But we're like, we still have the other one. We still have the other one. So we're maintaining all the old builds. We can roll back to it if we make, because as any of experienced people know, it's like any change of fixing a bug introduces 3 new ones. So it's like
always
it's extremely dangerous to be making changes on anything.
Yep.
But we fixed some issues where people weren't understanding things in the tutorial that we constantly had to say to them. And we shortened the demo so it was a little bit more punchy and the pacing was closer to what we wanted. So like just two quick little fixes. When we brought that Wednesday morning, we also had really cool part of this was Clarissa's brother and sister came. One of my close friends came. My Clarissa's brother's girlfriend came, and all of us were kind of running the booth together. If anybody has the experience of running a booth, I would definitely say like, please bring people to help you, because it was just way more important than I realized, that I would be talking to people the whole time and I wouldn't be able to really help people with the game, sub in or like explain things or, do anything, because I would be sucked into some conversation or other. And it was just so amazing to have friends there that would just like, just do the mechanics of like, oh, here's the controller, here's how you play, what's, oh, you're stuck, do this, right? And so, I mean, the end of the story is like, well, there's like no other way to say it other than like the 3 days we demoed the game were overwhelmingly positive reactions. It was just a really amazing experience. Like years of prototypes that had very lukewarm reactions. It was incredibly validating. Obviously, I immediately clamp down on that in my head and go like, well, that's only a couple hundred people. Like, these are all developers. Some things show better on a show floor than in reality. Like, all this stuff that I immediately start to think. But it definitely felt like I came out of GDC with a completely different mindset, different different level of confidence and understanding and feeling and just super hyper motivated to continue working. So that has been like an amazing experience in that regard. So,
$1 million question. Did anything you did the 2 days prior, did any of that blow up in your face?
So we ended up making little tiny changes even the nights between the days. One of those caused a delayed hard lock. So like it was working fine for half the day, and then halfway through the day it would start to hard lock on the tutorial end screen. And we tried it twice with a group. Luckily it was like early in the playtest, so like we tried it twice and then rolled back to an earlier build, and just the only change we had made there is like a clarity thing that we fixed. And so we just rolled with that one. So we had like 4 playtests at GDC that we ended up creating, and we ran mostly with the third one. And the third one has been the one I also send to folks that want to, review the game from a funding standpoint or all that stuff. So the third one was the one that ultimately was the most stable. The fourth one had some unknown crash that we still haven't looked into.
Well, that's still pretty cool. So like the third one you made while on site is the one that you were primarily showing, and it's still the one you continue to show.
Yep.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. So in your face, devs who try to tell you not to do that, I guess, huh?
No, they're right.
Yeah.
I definitely, thank God we had them to roll back to,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true. You still had the old versions.
Yeah.
I know that you won't bring it up, so I'll bring it up. For the indie pitch competition, you guys were awarded first place.
Yes. Just to be clear, it's TEDx though. There were 2 days. There were 2 days of the competition. Both days had a winner, so we were the winner of the second day. Yeah.
Okay. And that was the one that Jason De La Rocca was basically preparing you for by giving you some sort of like preemptive feedback, because he wasn't on the actual panel, but he's been on them before.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
And he offered that to all the contestants, so it wasn't like
it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. He just put it out there as an open offer. Just fun fact: Jason De La Rocca actually ran one of the first very, very successful game incubators here in Montreal. It was called Execution Labs. So I don't think it's running anymore. He's moved on to probably bigger and crazier things.
So it might be.
Oh yeah, so maybe it's still a thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I for some reason I thought that it wasn't running anymore. I don't know why.
Maybe you're right. But I know that he's emailing from that address, so I think he might. I don't know what their function is currently, but I know that he has like 2 decades of experience.
Oh
with
yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of
It's
process and incubation. He's amazing.
he's like the he's like the biz dev god around here, and he's just so well connected. He's so gracious with his time, and he just loves games and just loves the community. And so basically what Execution Labs was if you got an idea. He had a lot of people just dropping out of their jobs and pairing up with like 2 or 3 other people. Sometimes it would be students coming out of school. Sometimes it would be like people that are like veterans. And it was a place to go where basically the incubator, well, if anybody, I don't know if anybody out there really knows what an incubator is, but incubators basically are supporting you by bringing in like volunteer experts and veterans that can come in and take a look and give you feedback, but also they put you in sort of a track to be like kind of they build a platform basically for you to then pitch from. That's that essentially they attract investors and possible publishers that come to them to sort of see what the offering is this time around, and they kind of do it in cohorts basically, and just a little bit like it's almost like a school, it's almost like an internship that you can do. But anyways, it was very successful. A lot of those games actually got released out of Execution Labs. So he's a great guy. You should definitely try to connect with him. And if you're out there listening to this, because he's great. He's awesome.
And he has great GDC talks. Just if you look up his name on YouTube and stuff, I watched a lot of his stuff.
Prolific
there as well.
Yep. So we're quarter after. We should probably try to take some questions, but it sounds like you had something, Jacob.
I was just going to ask if people are still able to sign up to do playtests on the Begone Beast website.
Oh, yeah. So if you guys go to begonebeast.com, you can sign up for our email list, which will be where we distribute playtests in the future. I can't tell you exactly when the next playtest will run, but they will be frequent and numerous. So if you have any interest in helping us develop this game, it's going to be a critical part of our next year to have a lot of playtesters, and we're going to be doing a lot of support and cool stuff like that. So.
And actually, on just piggybacking on top of that, before we get into questions, I should also say something I wanted to bring up during this chat is we're actually currently talking to Tomáš about building a kind of a collaborative stream together, something that will allow us as a community to follow through the trials and tribulations of the development of a game, which I think is really great. And if some of you might have remembered that I was talking about doing something similar like this with the G1, which is the internally developed game that Agora has been sort of tinkering with. And then sort of Tomáš sort of sailed in, out of the right field and offered that maybe that could be something that we could actually do together. And so I'm excited by this because what I think there's lots of opportunities that are going to be born out of this for sure. Obviously, just be able to learn from the things that are happening, in real time during your development. And, I don't know. I think it's going to be great because we can always check in and sort of everyone can learn from your learnings. And that's kind of what we do here at Agora.Community, basically, at the end of the day. So it's nice to see something as raw and as real time as a development in progress. So it's going to be pretty cool. So please stay tuned for that because we're going to have some common sort of regular stream set up for that. Sorry, Jacob.
No, I was going to say to kick us off with some questions. Kristen actually has a question, which is my wife who knows Tomáš. Also for over 15 years. It's a two-parter. First, didn't Jacob have the best girlfriend in college? She was so cool. All right. She brought us food in the computer lab all the time. And then second part is, how do you maintain an appropriate balance now that you're in charge of yourself between overworking yourself like you used to, staying late, getting super focused on one tiny little thing over and over? How's that balance now?
Well, first off, yes, obviously, hard agree. And I would say on the second part, it's all fallen apart because I don't have a Jacob's girlfriend around to help manage everything and tell us we've been here too long or whatever. But yeah, I think I'm still figuring that out. I think I tend to run and Jacob, you know this, I tend to run really, really hot on something for a while and I'll work crazy hours and then I'll just have I work in these high intensity bursts, which is, when you're completely on your own is not, nobody's depending on me as much. So I can just kind of do that. I definitely feel like I'm evening out because the biggest thing that I think in the last year that I've really improved is less about managing my work schedule from a like, oh, how much work do I put in today or this day or that day. It's still very milestone oriented, so I tend to have like little mini crunches or relaxation periods built in. I've eased it out through, and I get, this isn't like a prescription to other people, but for me, like, I've managed for the first time in my life to like exercise every day and like spend time kind of like, doing more healthy things like cleaning my space and eating better and working out. And that has become something I've successfully been able to put into place daily. And so like that sort of forces me to, at least to some extent, be like, well, there's going to be 2 hours today that I'm not going to work because I have to like I'm getting older and this needs to be part of my life. It's just fact. Like I'm not going to be able to function if I don't take care of this spaceship I'm in. So like, and so that has helped a lot. I think the other thing I would say is like, I do a lot of task tracking. I wouldn't say I'm great at task predicting and like estimating how long something takes or something like that, but I definitely track everything I do so that I can see what has taken the longest, what hasn't. I like collecting data on my work and Clarissa's work as well. And so we have a lot of, it's just a basic like weekly list of what did we do this week, what didn't we do, and I take time to kind of put that together. There's a lot of tools for that. For now, have just been doing a whiteboard and I take pictures of it. It's like not super complicated. We are looking at doing project management software now that we're like possibly scaling up a little bit and things like that. But I highly, highly recommend that. Like, especially for me, like I have like the whiteboard right here. Like I put it very visible so I can like really see, like sometimes when my brain starts to spin, like I can just look at it and go like, okay, the top thing I'm trying to get done right now, stop thinking about the 80 other things you need to do and kind of prioritize. And then I like to think in terms of 2-week chunks. I know like agile methodology, all that stuff. Like for me, what it breaks down to is like, I like to know what is roughly like in the month's timeline. So like what's 3 months out? What is my goal, right? And then what this week do I want to accomplish from a goal perspective, not a task list perspective, but like what am I working toward? And so for an example of that might be something like, oh, this week we're trying to do the very first version of being able to see the game online between 2 computers. And so like, what do I need to do to help do that? A lot of that's on Clarissa because it's an engineering task, but if that's the goal, I can think about like, what are the tasks underneath that goal? What pushes us towards that? And I try to use that as a razor to prioritize against. So like I can be very easily scattered and be like, oh, it'd be so awesome to add another character or improve the animations on this. And I'm like, is that helping this goal, which is to see the game working on 2 computers connected through network? No. So I'm not going to work on that right now. Unless I have another goal that is like, increase the spectacle of the game, right? And so it's like, I want high spectacle for this week, which was a goal, like, for instance, right before the trailer. It's like, right before the trailer, we had, like, cubes as a lot of the enemies and stuff. And so it was like, well, now, finally, I can go prioritize replacing those cubes because for a trailer, it actually does matter that they're creatures and that they look spectacular, right? And so, like, that's kind of the loose way I think about that stuff.
It sounds like you have a good way of preventing the scope creep and staying focused on what it is you need to stay focused on for that particular sprint. Will you still work all night?
Very rarely these days, also just from physical limitation. But there was definitely, I mean, the 2 weeks leading up to GDC were a disaster from a just like scheduling standpoint. But it's just, I don't know, I'm crazy. I don't know what to do. Like, I think what helps is once you're working with like other people, there is a hard line I put where I'm like, I'm just never going to expect that from other people. And you just kind of have to be okay with things being delayed or something not being done on time. And like, you have to kind of be okay with that even when you do too much unhealthy things like working all night, because there's just limitations to that. And actually, there's also a lot of studies that say that's not even faster. Like, you end up working a lot more poorly, but there's some stuff I just push through because I just can't stop myself. So I don't know. I'm still learning. I'm sure I'll take some hard punches from that lesson soon, and then we'll be talking about that in a future stream.
Well, I mean, it's all about balance, right? I mean, it sounds like, you can't expect to fix everything. I think that the fact that you brought in some healthy habits like getting exercise and taking care of yourself will help counter some of the natural tendencies for Tomáš to be Tomáš sometimes. I think that I think it's what we all need to do. You can't expect, because otherwise you're going to be almost too hard on yourself. You should find a way of balancing who you are and like allowing yourself to indulge and sort of like go into a moment of passion and just totally work all night if that's what drives you. I mean, like that's sometimes sometimes that's, some people think that's completely unhealthy, but I don't know. I think that sometimes it's kind of like a sign of just being very passionate about what you do, as long as you don't do it all the time. And as long as you're not doing it because you feel like you have to, and I don't. Anyways, baby steps, I guess. Right. I have one little quick question, then we have two more here. And my question was about, it's related to the first one, which was about now you're kind of your own boss. I'm wondering, like, dynamically, going back to the beginning of this whole conversation today, where we talked about, your imposter syndrome and just being a little insecure I could see that being complicated. If you're your own boss, you only have yourself to let down now. And so, like, is that a struggle for you? Like, because I can see that being even extra hard, even more hard than having like these people that you're looking up to. You got to do good enough for them, or like it can also maybe be easier in some ways. I'm just curious what feelings you have on that topic.
Well, definitely not. I'm still not the only person I can let down. There's.
Well, sure. That's true. That's true. Because you could always find someone to be sort of scared to let down.
Yeah. And so, like, I think it's scary because in a weird way, for me, it feels like the truest version of this terror, which is like, now I'm just going to be directly interfacing with my player base and customers. Like,
that you've removed a middleman, which used to be your manager. Now you're just dealing with the clients. It's got worse.
And like the freeing aspect of that is that I can interpret those things myself, and I can hear it directly from those folks, right? Whereas before, you're hearing something that's like going down a chain to you from a manager that has their own like goals and needs and wants that might not line up even with the player base or with you, right? Yep. And so sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And so, like, removing that aspect, definitely now I'm the person interpreting it and I have my own goals, and maybe some people that do any work for me in the future are going to deal with that as well. But it definitely feels like, I think, very freeing to directly sort of, get the water right from the fire hose or whatever. Just go right from the source. But it also requires a lot more like discipline with sticking to what your goals are. And so it's almost like you need to create your own boss that is like the vision of the project, because otherwise it's easy to just, like, every time I hear feedback from somebody, my initial knee-jerk instinct is like, oh yeah, I could go fix that, and I have to like think to myself, like, is that in line with the experience that I'm trying to give with this game? Because most of the time it won't be, because people aren't giving feedback based on your goals. They're giving feedback based on their own goals or 100%. What they think will help the most, right? What they want the game to be. And so that doesn't make their feedback invalid. You just have to assess them based on the goals you have, or else if you're implementing things that all have different goals, the game will get worse, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's only a chance that it even gets better when you're super aligned anyway. So it's like, it's very difficult.
Because the game can't be everything, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. I'm going to drop a question up here. This is from a somewhat regular community member. Do you have some ways to improve estimating tasks? They struggle with this a lot. Was wondering if you had a way of doing this. I think in game development, that's even extra hard because there's often a lot of correlating sort of subtasks that have to happen, and it can become complicated. So have you gotten, what's your technique, or what's your high level philosophy on this?
Oh man, this is a tough one. I still
Yeah.
don't feel good at this. I'm actually having to do this a lot now because I'm building like a production timeline
Yep.
for the foreseeable future to ship this
Yep.
game. So I'm estimating tasks for every discipline, and it's like
Mhm.
I don't know. I think one half of it I would say is like you just it's more about being okay with it being a huge guess. Like
Mm.
you just make a guess and you live with the fact that it's going to be very wrong. Uh, like someone just told me, it's like whatever you guess, it's going to be probably anywhere from 30% to 100% wrong. And so, but you still need to make a guess. Like you
Yeah,
need to
because
just,
it gives you a target,
yeah,
like
it
a
gives you
goal to head
something
towards,
to
right?
start thinking about.
Yeah.
The other thing is like, tracking what you have done is the best way to see what you will be doing. And another way to do it is like, I mean, you can also reverse the way you're thinking about it, which isn't so much like, I don't know if this is useful for the question asker, but it's like, instead of thinking about of like, how long will this task take, more about how much time am I willing to spend on this? And then I'm going to highly prioritize every day to get the most I can out of this, right?
Mm.
And then whatever I have, and it took exactly as long as I said, right? And so regardless of like, it's like, okay, I'm going to give this 2 days. Oh man, I better be highly prioritized because I'm just going to have what I have in 2 days. And that's what
Mm.
GDC did for us. There was like,
Yep.
I cut like, I would say 60% of the things
Oh,
that I
yeah.
wanted to do for GDC. And
Yep.
that's okay. Like, it's just like, you sort of treat the time as the driver rather than the tasks as the driver.
Yeah. Natural selection, right? There's a bit of Darwinian sort of theory going on when you
Right.
have to ship something, basically, because it's just like you just can't fit on all the things, so you have to triage it, basically. Yeah.
And I'm actually thinking about that even in my sort of year-long, multi-year production timeline. I'm thinking about it in terms of like, where can we get the game? Because and part of this is because the game is not a linear experience; it's a replayed, short, session-based experience. We can kind of be like, well, let's get it. Like, what can we call shipped? Like where can we say this game is a total experience in this amount of time? And then where can we get it to, like, after months or years of iteration after the fact? So like, it's there's no magic to it. It's kind of like, it's a lot of guessing. Like, I've even gotten consultants at this point to help me who are like experienced in doing this stuff at huge studios. And I think their help has been very good, but it's also this validation of like, and you have to be okay guessing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's good. Okay, I got one last one. We're actually technically a minute over. Are you both okay for like a quick last question? Okay. So let's do it really fast here. Okay, so question here is, what code would someone need? This is actually from Scott. What code would someone need to learn to become a tech animator, if any? And where could they easily start to learn that?
So just in the context of this, a technical animator is I think a separate role than like a systems animation design. Technically, I mean, every studio has kind of like roles.
Yeah, it
names all over
depends on the
place.
studio for sure.
So I'm going to talk about the systems aspect of it. Like tech animator, I think there's like a bunch of stuff like Python and like rigging kind of things that you would know. I'm not as familiar with all of that. On the system side, it's actually, you can actually do that without any coding. I would say like, for me, in Unity, there's a thing called Anim. I think it's still called Anim. And
yeah, I think so.
And a third-party program called Playmaker that I use to do all my animation systems work. And those are like node-based coding things. A lot of engines have some sort of node-based,
like Blueprint and Unreal.
Yeah, exactly. Unreal is Blueprint. So learning Blueprints in Unreal would be really, really fantastic if you want to do any kind of systems design and animation, because all of that would most likely be handled through Blueprints or something like that in an engine. There's certainly places that still handle it strictly through code, but those places usually have animation systems handled by a programmer, not by an animator.
Yeah, true story.
And so I guess my answer is like, you can do this without knowing any code. Now, logic, you definitely need to know.
Yeah, unavoidable.
And understanding like logic and theory and all that stuff. But that's not like something that's insurmountable. Like you can just dive in and kind of know that and start learning that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that these these sort of node-based either plugins, if you're talking about Unity with Mechanim, or built right into Unreal's blueprint. These are like, it's almost like visual programming. It's they remove, the logic still needs to be there. You need to understand flow of logic. You need to understand how to make something sort of performant, and you need to understand all these things. But you just, what it removes is the need to like learn a new language, basically the syntax of a programming language like C++ or C# if you're dealing with Unity. But you still absolutely, like what Tomáš was saying, it's like you're still going to need to. It removes an obstacle from the path. You can start thinking logically right away and start doing things without learning that language. It'd almost be like, yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but it can be very liberating, but it's still not, it doesn't make it easy necessarily. It just removes a complication.
But if you're able to figure out, if you're coming from an animation background and you can figure out the spline editor and graphics, stuff, you can figure this stuff out. It's going to look like spaghetti at first. It's going to look really crazy at first, but you can figure it out. And just as a side note, what's funny about node-based programming and visual scripting and all that stuff is like, it's like this amazing thing for artists and this amazing thing for people that don't know how to code. But every single programmer I've ever talked to is like, why does this exist?
Oh yeah, for sure.
This is like the hardest and slowest
spaghetti
way. Yeah. It's like, I can make everything in this with like half the amount of lines and way faster.
Yep.
And I'm like, yes, but you speak this other language.
That's
like,
right.
For me, it's like amazing to be able to just structure everything in these nodes. So it's always funny. Something cool about Unreal is I believe that all of their node-based, like all their blueprints can be exported as a text.
It can.
Like,
you can
kind of work with programmers sort of.
Most engineers are going to look at that and call it spaghetti code and then rewrite it anyways. But the power is like I always believe that the power here is not to try to ship a game with all that necessarily. But it's so you could prototype an idea really quickly. Because if I could build something myself and then show an engineer, and then they're like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. And then they can use their powerful brain to do it in a much better, more elegant way. This to me is a way of bridging the gap on a level of communicating with someone like like you said, we don't speak the same language, me and like a C++ engineer, but we can, because we both speak the same language of playing a game. So if I can get that in his hands, he can then, or he or she or anybody could be playing this and be like, okay. Because the nine times out of 10, when I try to explain how I want the animation to work to an engineer, I'm probably not going to get what I expected, or at least hoped for.
Well,
and it's not their fault. It's just difficult.
But also, even further than that, you might not even be able to know what you want yet.
Totally.
Because a lot
why
of
waste an engineer's time, right?
Right. A lot of that systems design stuff involves a lot of playing and trying things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making games in general, there's still no better method than trial and error. It's like literally
it's at the core
top
of everything.
The top. Everybody is just trying stuff and then go, crap. Okay.
That's right. That's right. Okay, well, we're 6 minutes over, so I'm going to officially call it because I know you're both very, very busy. I want to thank you, Jacob, and you, Tomáš. Thank you for being here today. It was definitely a fun topic to dig into. I wish you all the luck, obviously, moving forward with this development. Thanks. And for the community, I'm excited to, of course, as I already mentioned, if you just showed up now, that we'll be doing some regular streams with Tomáš as we can explore the sort of what it looks like in the factory as someone tries to build an actual game with a very small skeleton team of him and one other person, basically. So that I can imagine the drama already. It's going to be amazing. So thank you both, and I'll see you around, and have a really great day, both of you. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Thanks, everyone.
So I'm going to be talking to Tomáš hopefully this week to try to figure out what that roadmap would actually look like, and I don't think we're going to have a final version of it, but I think it's how we plan on starting it is going to be how it starts, and then we'd like to try to add layers to it as we move forward. We had all kinds of crazy ideas. I don't want to kind of drop them now because I don't want to speak before I can actually promise anything. I tend to do that way too often, but there are some pretty cool ideas we got in the hopper here that we can actually really leverage this sort of backstage pass that we're going to have, which is a really big privilege as far as I'm concerned, because I know there's a lot of you out there that really do have ideas. And because game development is so accessible now with the visual sort of programming, like we were talking about, just a moment ago, it is not inconceivable for a small group of people to put something together, as we see Tomáš is doing that with his wife, which is kind of amazing. But also, I think it's going to become more and more commonplace as we move forward with what technology has to offer creators. And so I think it'd be really great to be able to learn from that. He's sort of navigating this sort of uncharted minefield for us in a way, and we'll be there to cheer him on and be there to console him when things are not going as well as he would like. So stay tuned for more news on that. We plan on starting that up pretty soon, probably within the next few weeks, and we'll make a big deal about it when it goes live. I'm sure that Scott and I will try to blast this out on the airwaves when we're ready to go. So thanks for being here today. It's always nice to see everyone in chat, and have a really great week. I'll see some people tomorrow night as we're streaming, and then we'll see. I think there's a stream. I can't remember if it's a Monday or Friday stream next week. Let me see really quickly. Is going to be, it's Friday, the 27th. There's a pretty big gap between the conversations. And that's with Nick Ladd. I think I mentioned this before. This is going to be a fun one because we're going to be talking about VR, but not VR as an experience, as an end user, but VR as a creator, because he spends a lot of his time working on pushing the envelope in a very new type of medium of animation, which is animating in a VR space using something. Well, I don't know if he's still using it, but he used Quill a lot back in the day. And it's actually really quite impressive what people are able to do. And he'll do a little demo for us, and we'll kind of pick his brain a little bit as to how he got into that, and maybe some tips and tricks, and for people who are maybe interested to try it themselves. So yeah, hopefully I can see some of you then. And yeah, tomorrow night we're doing another round of free animation reviews from the community. So if you're interested in having your work reviewed, you could always book an expert on our website, but you can also there's a form floating around. If someone can actually drop that, that'd be great. Maybe it's already happened. There's a form that you can actually submit your stuff to, and what we do is we just randomly pull 3 from that hat, and we get them reviewed during these special sessions that we do every once in a while. So that's it, I guess, for me. See everybody around. Stay animated. Talk to you soon. Cheers.